fear? It's a primal instinct, a reflex embedded deep in our DNA, designed to keep us alive. It warns us of danger. It sharpens our senses. It pushes us to act. But what happens when fear is no longer just about survival? What happens when fear is weaponized and turned against you? The biological roots of fear. Your brain is wired for fear. The moment a threat appears, real or imagined, your amygdala takes control. It floods your body with adrenaline. Your heart races. Your breath shortens. Your mind stops thinking logically and shifts into survival mode. This is what kept our ancestors alive when they faced predators in the wild. But today, the predators have changed, and they no longer hunt you with claws and teeth. They hunt you with headlines, propaganda, and manipulation. How fear clouds judgment. When fear takes over, your brain stops analyzing. It reacts. And that's exactly why fear is so powerful. Fear overrides logic. It makes you seek safety at any cost. It makes you cling to authority. It makes you accept things you would never accept in a calm state of mind. This is why fear is the ultimate weapon. Because when you're afraid, you don't ask questions. You obey. Fear as a tool of control. Fear has been used as a tool of control for centuries. Kings, dictators, and governments have all relied on fear to keep people in line. Fear of enemies. Fear of persecution. Fear of questioning authority. When people are afraid, they are easier to manipulate, easier to control, easier to silence. And those in power know this all too well. The modern fear industry. Today, fear isn't just a political tool. It's an industry, an economy, a product sold to you daily. The media profits from your fear. The more afraid you are, the more you watch, the more you click, the more you consume. Fear sells. Fear keeps you hooked. Fear keeps you weak. And as long as they control what you fear, they control you. The psychological cost of living in fear. But living in a constant state of fear comes at a price. Fear is stress. Stress weakens the mind and body. Chronic fear leads to anxiety, depression, and irrational decision-making. It traps you in a cycle of helplessness. The more afraid you are, the more you seek protection. And the more you seek protection, the more control you give away. Breaking free from the fear trap. So, how do you escape the grip of fear? First, recognize it. Question it. When you feel afraid, ask yourself, who benefits from my fear? Is this fear real? Or is it being manufactured? The more you understand fear, the less power it has over you. Chapter 2. The Science of Fear and Manipulation. Fear is not just an emotion, it's a mechanism, a system, a switch in your brain that can be turned on and left on. The moment you feel fear, your body reacts. But what if I told you someone is controlling that switch? How fear rewires your brain. Your brain is an intricate machine, constantly scanning for threats. When fear strikes, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, activates. It sends an immediate distress signal, releasing stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Your pulse quickens. Your muscles tense. Your focus narrows. This is a natural response designed for survival. But what happens when fear becomes constant? When fear isn't about escaping a wild animal, but something more abstract, something that never leaves your mind. When fear is prolonged, it changes you. Your brain starts adapting to a world where danger is everywhere. Rational thinking takes a back seat. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for reasoning and logic, becomes less active. You become more reactive, more impulsive, more easily manipulated. Fear isn't just something you feel. It becomes something you live in. The fear loop, keeping you hooked. There's a reason why fear-based messaging is so effective. It triggers a cycle, a loop that keeps you locked in. Here's how it works. First, you're shown something that triggers fear. Crisis, a threat, a danger. Next, your brain reacts, flooding you with stress hormones. You start seeking safety, looking for reassurance, looking for solutions. And then, the same sources that fed you fear offer you comfort. They tell you what to think, who to trust, what to do. And just like that, the loop is complete. Fear, reaction, control. Over and over again. Governments use it. News outlets use it. Advertisers use it. And the more fear you consume, the more you seek it out. That's how fear becomes addictive. You don't even realize it happening. But someone else does. The industry of fear. Who profits from your anxiety? Fear is profitable. Entire industries depend on your fear. The news industry thrives on fear-driven headlines because fear gets clicks, views, and engagement. Social media platforms prioritize fear-based content because it keeps you scrolling. Corporations use fear to sell security, insurance, medicine, weapons, even food. Politicians use fear to gain votes, justify wars, and pass laws that would normally be rejected. Your fear is their business model. Think about it. Why is the news always negative? Why are you constantly told the world is dangerous? Because fear keeps you coming back. The more anxious you are, the more you consume. The more you consume, the more they control the narrative. And the cycle continues. Fear in politics, the ultimate control mechanism. Fear has always been a tool of power. Throughout history, leaders have used fear to rally people, suppress dissent, and justify extreme actions. We must act now, or disaster will strike. We need more control, or we will all suffer. These are the messages used to push through policies that benefit the powerful, while stripping away your freedom. And the worst part, it works. Fear-driven politics thrives on creating enemies, external enemies, internal enemies, enemies that must be feared, hated, and defeated. But the real enemy? It's the fear itself. Because as long as you're afraid, you won't question. You won't resist. You'll comply. And compliance is exactly what they want. The psychological toll of living in fear. Living in a constant state of fear doesn't just affect your thinking. It affects your body. Chronic fear weakens the immune system. It increases stress levels, leading to anxiety, depression, and even physical illness. Your body isn't designed to live in fear indefinitely. Yet, that's exactly what the world is pushing you towards. When you live in fear, you become passive. You stop taking risks. You stop thinking for yourself. You accept things you never would have accepted before. And slowly, you lose control over your own mind. Chapter 3: Fear in Politics, Media, and Marketing. Fear isn't just an emotion. It's a tool, a strategy, a currency used by those in power to control the masses. Governments use it. Corporations exploit it. The media thrives on it. And the more afraid you are, the easier you are to manipulate. How politics thrives on fear. Throughout history, fear has been the foundation of political control. Leaders, dictators, and governments have understood one universal truth. A fearful population is an obedient population. Fear creates urgency. Urgency demands action. And when people are afraid, they will accept anything that promises security, even if it means giving up their freedoms. Look at history. Wars have been started over fear. Laws have been passed in the name of security. Citizens have turned against each other because fear told them to. And each time, those in power gained more control while the people lost more rights. But here's the secret: the real power of fear in politics isn't in external threats. It's in division. Fear is used to separate people into groups. Us versus them, left versus right, rich versus poor. The moment you fear the other side, you stop questioning those in charge. You focus your energy on fighting your neighbor instead of challenging the system. And while you're busy being afraid of the enemy they created, they win. The role of media: feeding the fear machine. Fear sells. And the media knows it. Every breaking news alert, every shocking headline, every sensationalized story, it's all designed to keep you engaged. Why? Because fear keeps you watching. The longer you watch, the more money they make. It's that simple. Studies show that negative news spreads faster than positive news. Fear triggers an emotional response, making people more likely to share stories that make them anxious, angry, or outraged. And social media algorithms are built to amplify this effect. The more extreme the fear, the higher the engagement. The higher the engagement, the more profit. It's a system designed to keep you afraid, because fear means business. But here's the part they don't tell you. The more you consume fear-driven news, the more your brain normalizes it. You become addicted to the fear. You start seeking it out. And soon, you don't even realize you're trapped in a cycle of anxiety, paranoia, and control. Marketing fear, selling you security you don't need. Fear isn't just used to control you. It's used to sell to you. Advertisers know that fear creates urgency, and urgency leads to impulsive decisions. If they can make you afraid of something, aging, crime, rejection, failure, then they can sell you the solution. Think about it. The beauty industry thrives on the fear of aging. The fitness industry profits off the fear of being unattractive. Insurance companies bank on the fear of disaster. Security firms grow rich from the fear of crime. Fear isn't just a tool, it's a trillion-dollar industry. And it's everywhere. Commercials use fear-based messaging. Social media influencers exploit insecurities. Companies manufacture problems just to sell you the cure. The strategy is simple. Make you feel inadequate. Make you feel at risk. Then offer you a way out for a price. The psychological impact of constant fear. But what happens when you live in a constant state of fear? When every headline, every ad, every political speech is designed to keep you anxious? The answer is simple. You become easier to control. Fear weakens your ability to think critically. It makes you reactive instead of rational. It keeps you locked in survival mode, constantly looking for guidance, protection, and reassurance from the very institutions that profit from your fear. And that is the cycle they never want you to break. Your body wasn't designed to live in fear 24/7. Chronic fear leads to stress, anxiety, depression, and health problems. It clouds your judgment. It makes you more likely to follow the herd, to comply without questioning, to accept the world as it's presented to you instead of challenging the narrative. Chapter 4. Recognizing Fear-Based Manipulation. Fear surrounds us. It's in the news we watch, the leaders we follow, the products we buy. But what if I told you much of this fear isn't real? What if I told you that fear is being crafted, packaged, and delivered to you, not to protect you, but to control you? How fear manipulation works. Fear-based manipulation is not random. It follows a pattern. A calculated system designed to make you react, not think. The cycle is simple. First, create fear. Next, offer a solution. Finally, gain compliance. The more you repeat this cycle, the more control you have. And the most dangerous part, most people never realize it's happening. Think about it. How often do you hear phrases like, "This could be the end, act now before it's too late," or "If you don't do this, you'll regret it forever"? These are not just words. They are psychological triggers, designed to push you into a state of fear, designed to keep you from questioning the source, designed to make you act before you think. The tactics of fear manipulation. So how exactly do they make you afraid? Here are the most common tactics used to manipulate fear. 1. The illusion of immediate danger. The first tactic is urgency. When something is framed as an immediate threat, your brain shifts into survival mode. You stop analyzing. You start reacting. Governments use this to pass emergency laws. Corporations use this to sell products. The media uses this to keep you watching. Because when something is urgent, you don't have time to question it. 2. The use of authority figures. The second tactic, authority. When someone in power tells you to be afraid, you're more likely to believe them. Why? Because we are wired to trust authority. We assume they know more than we do. But what happens when those in power use fear to serve their own interests? What happens when fear becomes a tool, not for truth, but for control. 3. Fear by repetition. The more you hear something, the more you believe it. This is the third tactic, repetition. Say something enough times, and it becomes reality, even if it isn't true. The news cycle operates on this principle. The more they repeat a fear-based message, the more it embeds itself in your mind, until eventually you stop questioning. You just accept. 4. The creation of an enemy. Every fear campaign needs a villain. Someone to blame, someone to hate, someone to fear. It could be another country, a political party, a social movement. The goal is simple: divide and conquer. When people fear each other, they stop questioning those in power. They become distracted. They fight amongst themselves. And the real manipulator, they remain in control. Real-world examples of fear-based manipulation. You don't have to look far to see fear-based manipulation in action. It's everywhere. Politics. Leaders use fear to gain support. They create crises, real or exaggerated, to justify extreme actions. They tell you, if you don't vote for me, everything will fall apart. They create a sense of instability so that you cling to their promises of safety. But in reality, the more afraid you are, the more power they have. Media. The news industry thrives on fear. Fear keeps you glued to your screen. Fear drives ad revenue. Fear makes stories go viral. And that's why the news you see is overwhelmingly negative. If you believe the world is dangerous, you'll keep watching. And the more you watch, the more they profit. Marketing and consumerism. Look at advertisements. What do they sell you? Fear. Fear of aging. Fear of missing out. Fear of being unattractive, unsuccessful, alone. They tell you that without their product, you are not enough. But here's the truth. They don't want you to feel secure. They want you to feel afraid. Because fear makes you buy. The psychological effects of constant fear. But what happens to your mind when you are constantly exposed to fear? When every message you hear is telling you to be afraid, your stress levels rise. Your brain stays in survival mode. You stop thinking critically. Fear hijacks your mind, making you easier to manipulate. You become more anxious, more reactive, more willing to accept anything that promises safety, even if that safety is an illusion. Chapter 5. Turning fear into strength. Fear is powerful. It can paralyze you. It can control you. But what if I told you it can also set you free? What if fear isn't something to avoid, but something to master? The difference between those who are controlled by fear and those who rise above it is simple. They learn how to use fear instead of letting it use them. Understanding the true purpose of fear. Fear is not the enemy. Fear is a signal, a warning, a message from your mind that something matters, that you are stepping into unknown territory, that you are being challenged, and that is where growth begins. The problem is not fear itself. The problem is how we respond to it. Most people run. They avoid fear. They let it dictate their choices. They let it keep them small, weak, afraid. But those who understand fear, they don't run. They face it. They transform it. And in doing so, they gain something priceless: control. How to reframe fear as power. Your mind is your battlefield, and fear is the weapon used against you. But what if you could turn that weapon around? What if, instead of fear controlling you, you controlled it? It all starts with reframing how you see fear. One fear is a call to action. When fear arises, don't see it as a stop sign. See it as a green light, a signal that something important is at stake. Instead of saying, "I'm afraid, so I won't do this," start saying, "I'm afraid, so I must do this." The things you fear the most are often the things that will make you the strongest. 2. Fear sharpens your mind. Fear puts you on high alert. It makes you more aware, more focused, more present. If you learn to control your fear instead of letting it control you, it becomes a tool, a way to heighten your awareness instead of clouding your judgment. 3. Fear creates growth. Every great achievement in history came from someone who was afraid, but acted anyway. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's action in the face of fear. The more you embrace fear, the more you grow. The more you grow, the stronger you become. Practical strategies to master fear. So, how do you take fear and turn it into strength? How do you train your mind to resist fear-based manipulation? Here's how. 1. Question the fear. The first step is awareness. When fear arises, don't just accept it. Question it. Ask yourself, is this fear real? Or is it being used to control me? Who benefits from my fear? The more you analyze fear, the weaker its hold becomes. 2. Shift your focus. Fear grows when you feed it. The more you focus on what could go wrong, the stronger the fear becomes. But if you shift your focus to what could go right, you starve fear of its power. Instead of asking, what if I fail? Ask, what if I succeed? Instead of focusing on the danger, focus on the opportunity. 3. Take small steps into fear. Fear only controls you when you avoid it. But when you face it little by little, it starts to shrink. Take small steps toward the things that scare you. The more you expose yourself to fear, the more you prove to your mind that it is not as powerful as it seems. 4. Build mental resilience. Strength comes from training. Just like a muscle, your mind can be trained to handle fear. Meditation, deep breathing, visualization, these are tools that can help you build mental resilience. When fear arises, instead of panicking, breathe. Stay present. Train yourself to stand strong instead of collapsing. 5. Take control of your environment. If fear is being used as a weapon against you, then take back control. Stop consuming fear-based content. Limit your exposure to negative news, fear-driven narratives, and manipulative messaging. Surround yourself with information that empowers, not weakens you. Fear thrives in a chaotic environment. So create one where fear cannot survive. Fear as your greatest ally. The world will always try to make you afraid. Fear will always be there. But the question is, will you let it control you? Or will you learn to control it? The strongest people in history were not fearless. They were afraid. But they refused to let fear make their choices for them. They turned their fear into power, into action, into unstoppable momentum. And you can do the same. When you feel fear, don't run. Lean into it. Understand it. Use it. Because the moment you stop letting fear control you, that's the moment you become truly free. Closing message. Fear is a weapon, but you don't have to be its target. The choice is yours. Be controlled or take control. The world belongs to those who master fear. The only question is, will you?